8:40. Okay, welcome to the regularly publicly noticed meeting of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers. I'm Peter Halley, and let me establish that there is a quorum present. And so I'll just call names. Baird, you're present. Scott Ohm, are you present?
I am present, and I have to leave at 11:30.
Okay, yeah, me too. Patty Deuster, are you here? Not yet. Gary Beller?
Here.
Okay, Peter Kahn?
Here.
Lou Bassano? Don Green?
Here.
Pamela Swan? Is that, I think, I heard something, but I'm not sure what.
Don's here.
Okay, I heard Don's here, but not Pam yet. Gene Briskman? Keep getting little blips here, but no real voices. Donna Martino?
Here.
Lynn Filipsky? Steve Perlman?
I'm here, and Patty Doyster had emailed me. She's not going to be on the call today.
Okay, Bill Gardner is not going to be on the call. Peter Halley, I'm here. Is Ralph now officially off at this point? Ralph Kunsel? Yeah. And then, so that.
This is his last meeting if he were to join us, so.
Okay, but he hasn't apparently. So let me just total up. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
8.
You're okay, Peter. You're
And
okay.
8 with me, yeah. Okay, so we've got a quorum, in which case I will call the meeting to order. The meeting is going to be audio and video recorded. Be aware that anything you say will be recorded. If you have anything in your background picture that you'd rather other people not see, it's fine to just have your name show up on the screen. This meeting will have public comment, but we will go through our ordinary course of business and go through our members first. If you want to be recognized, raise your hand, and I will recognize you, and we will proceed accordingly. So we've got a quorum. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay. And we have the minutes of the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the proposed minutes?
So moved.
A couple of typos in number 7 and 8, I think.
Okay. Let's pull that up and
I'm not looking at it.
let me see if I can find
There was a sentence that said not when it shouldn't have been not or something, I forget.
So 7 says Lynn was not present, but reported no information since our last meeting.
Right.
she sent me an email saying I had no new information.
So maybe we just clarify that.
Yep.
And Steve had nothing to report. That's 8.
Yeah, I didn't think you need that in the minutes.
Probably. So, okay, we can cross that out. As revised, is your motion to approve the revised minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Steve,
Second.
second.
I'm sorry.
Second. I'll second.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, minutes as revised are approved. So we're now on to our first. So let me just address the lack of a speaker other than our own voices. I did reach out to a number of speakers, and it turns out this is graduation weekend for some people, and it's a whole host of nobody that we really wanted to hear immediately was available. However, we now have commitments from Libby Gibson for our next meeting in July. And then I have a commitment from the new chief of police for a meeting in August. And I've got the date here, but so we've got those two down. When we get further into whoever we want to hear from, we'll sort of fill in the schedule and do our best to get them here. So let's see. Update on Town Council Study Committee. Donna, do you want to let us know where that stands?
Yes. On Wednesday, we did vote to move forward with proposing a town council form of government. We're going to be, we set a schedule for the next 3 months. We're going to continue to meet every other week through early October. Joe Grouse, our chair, meets every other Monday after following our Wednesday meeting with the Collins Institute, which is part of UMass in Boston. And they are preparing presentations, and they're going to help us as we move forward with the necessary documents. We also have to begin preparing a new charter, which is required for our government, whether we adopt something from Barnstable, but we'll have to have definitely the Nantucket imprint on it. We're going to prepare some things for the 2025 ATM. I'm not sure what they have in mind. And then ultimately, it's going to be the voters who decide if we have a town council form of government in the future. But we're excited to move forward, and we'd like to do this. We feel that it's much better at this stage, at this time, to have a more effective and immediate form of government that will have meetings once, twice a month throughout the year. We just need that with everything going on in life today.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. We'll see. One step at a time.
Exactly. It's an appropriate step, and I guess the devil is going to be in the details now. And so, do you have an idea? As I understand, it's the Collins Institute is doing some form of assistance. Who will be drafting the charter, and who will be, giving the charter drafters the sort of the directions as to what direction to go in with this charter, because the words of the charter are going to end up being the most important thing.
I agree. We've already had meetings with John Giorgio. I think it's really going to be, it's Joe Grouse and Jeff Carlson, and maybe Jill Veith gets involved in some of these meetings directly with Collins Institute. But we've already had discussions about what we want in the charter, but obviously we're going to need the guidance of, we're going to need legal guidance, and we're prepared for that as well. It's running along pretty smoothly, actually. When we had the vote, only one person really wanted more information about the different forms of government. But actually, we've gone over it, all the 3 forms of government, and 90% of the members said, let's move forward. So everybody is now in agreement that we're moving forward with it. And also to go back to our meeting, Peter, I did remind the TCSC that our committee is very much supportive of this new form of government. And I mentioned your name as well.
If you were to make an educated guess as to what existing charter Nantucket is likely to use as its template, not necessarily as the final document. Do you have any, confident guess and something that we might then take a look at? Because one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is whether either whatever the charter is that we're using as our template or any other charter that has been considered, whether any of those charters have a role for non-voting taxpayers in them.
We are looking seriously at the Barnstable template. And I think Kathy submitted a copy of their organizational chart for their government. So we're going to kind of work off that and then add what's necessary to make it a Nantucket Town Council. That things that are particular to our government. As far as the non-voting taxpayers, I constantly bring that up. We definitely will be involved in commissions that feed into the majority of the town council members. So it's going to be definitely a step up kind of thing. In Barnstable, they don't vote. The non-voting taxpayers don't vote, but they are very involved in all the different commissions.
Yeah.
So we will have more of a voice. There's no question about it.
In Massachusetts law, I think we've been over this a year or two ago. Under Massachusetts law, there is no provision for non-residents to vote on anything in the state. And so I think that what our goal ought to be, and be interested in what other people think. Of course, we have a target which nobody knows where the bullseye is here, because we haven't seen a draft of a document, although we might be able to look at the Barnstable Town Charter and see where we might fit in that. We currently have a Nantucket Town Charter where there is a role, some might say prominent, some might not say prominent, for non-voting taxpayers. And so there is a precedent in the existing Nantucket charter for a group, for our group to exist and provide input. And it seems to me that if we all think that there is a future role for non-voting taxpayers in the new form of government as it takes shape, that we ought to figure out how to basically import the current situation at the very least into the new situation.
Peter, could you be more specific?
Yes. What specifics are you looking for me?
What is our existing role in Nantucket's charter?
It's actually on our website. There is a bylaw that which I can't quote by heart, but basically says there will be an advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers, and that its mission is to bring items of concern to non-voting taxpayers to the select board. And that's where we are. And it specifies how many members there shall be. It specifies what the quorum will be, the terms and office. You're part of the structure of Nantucket government. It doesn't say anything about us voting. It just says this is a committee, and its job is to let us know about the concerns of non-voting taxpayers.
So the issues would be brought to the select board now. That's right.
Yeah.
So that's what you're referring to?
Yes, yes. And so as I understand it, well, I haven't read the Barnstable charter But if we're copying it, the select board, well, we actually have two things. We can bring these things to the select board, and then we also have a seat at town meeting where the moderator is to recognize us to speak on matters of import. So we have a statutory duty to do things with respect to what I'll call the management side of Nantucket, which is the select board.
Mhm.
And we have a right, I guess you would call it, or at least the chair of the committee has a right to address the town meeting, which is the legislative side of the town government. And it's those two things, because as I understand it, the legislature and the select board are going to sort of be mushed together into one entity.
Yes,
With other things to follow.
right.
And so I think it would be appropriate, and I think you all ought to be thinking about this, because maybe I'm thinking wrong, or you can
Not at all.
better than I can, that we ought to have no less than the same role that we have now.
Or perhaps more. I
Yeah, I'm
agree.
not
That's
sure
a
about
very
that,
good way to
Peter.
position it.
Peter, I
Yeah,
want you to think about it a different way. I don't think that is necessarily correct.
Oh,
Because it seems to me that, and I don't know what the Barnstable, their format is, but it could be that the reason that we were given the ability to speak but not vote at the annual town meeting is because they have the meeting, that's the legislature, and that's where all the voting is done by the entire voting population. Few of whom actually show up, of course. But in this new format, let's suppose that with God's help, we actually get approval, the town gets approval to change the form of government, and we end up with this new town council, and we end up with 9 or 10, whatever they decide to be, members of the council, who are our new legislature. And let's suppose the town council meets, the legislature, the town council meets every month or every 2 months. And let's suppose that at those meetings, anyone that wants to speak, whether they're voting or non-voting, because remember, the people aren't voting anymore, just these people, just these 9. So it doesn't matter whether we are a voting taxpayer or a not voting taxpayer, because we're not voting, no one's voting anymore except these 9 people. The only question about voting is how do the 9 people get elected? And that's because they are elected by the voting residents. But that's only to select their representatives. And we don't have a vote in that anyway, as you know. So the question is, we may be no worse off than anybody else, because if they're meeting once a month or every other month, and we and every non-voting and voting, anybody who wants to speak up can speak up to the town council, why would they need to put a provision in like we had before? We have the vote. We have the voice. Everybody has the voice. That's the beauty of this town council thing.
Donna?
yeah, I just, what we are thinking about is at least 2 meetings a month, for one thing. The other is with Barnstable, and we are going to emulate them to a certain extent. They have, you can sign in when you come to a meeting, a town council meeting, and each person is allowed to speak. And it doesn't matter, Gary, to your point, you're right. We have a voice there.
Yep.
But I see what Peter Halley is saying. Since we already have a role, we want to be sure we have that, and perhaps even a separate commission. I mean, well, continuing as a committee and maybe becoming more involved. I see this as our opportunity. because we do represent most of the population, even though we don't vote.
Scott,
I'm not
what's
sure
your
that-
thought?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is, if I recall correctly, the enabling language says that our role is to also advise the town manager. And I remember specifically when I was committed, she said to me, look, I'm after actionable stuff that, that we can actually do something about. And I wouldn't imagine that would change a whole lot. They were still presumably going to have a town manager, and presumably that town manager is still going to want the advice of something like what we are. The second point I'd make is I think that there is a difference between individuals speaking themselves and something that is, something that's formatted as a committee, even though we're not elected, and we've got to remember that part, by anybody. So the only authority we have is, advisory. But to me, there certainly is a greater impact on process, when, we can do things like write carefully thought out letters saying you're inadvertently violating the Constitution, guys. I think I'm with you, Peter, that, the role we have, we should preserve. I don't know what more there is we can do, that's not either, that's not going to look like trying to aggrandize the committee, which I think we have to be very careful about too. But certainly the role we have, I think, continues to make sense, whether, it's a town meeting or it's a council. And, and of course, right now, anybody, the other answer to this is right now, anybody can go speak at the selectmen meeting. You don't have to be, a voter. It's only the town meeting that's a question, and probably different between the two items.
Yeah. I obviously I tend to agree with you, Scott. Yeah, I think we should all go on our own website, and I think it's you scroll down toward the bottom of the website, and it has the existing statutory language of what our duty is. I don't recall the town manager being specific, but we have bent and twisted it in so many ways over the years that if we have something important to say, we'll go to the select board, we'll go to the FinCom, we'll go wherever we want to go, with the appropriate sort of words justifying that we have standing to do so. And so I think probably for our own homework in considering this issue, everybody ought to at least be familiar with the existing statutory language, and it's only 2 or 3 paragraphs long. It's not a heavy lift. It's number one. Number two, I have drafted and shared with virtually nobody, but shared with a couple of people, sort of an expansion of the existing statutory language, and it's based upon. I one time was a resident of Washington, D.C., and Washington has a something called advisory neighborhood commissions. And they're meant to sort of bring the select board or town council into the neighborhood to deal with neighborhood issues, which is similar to what we're doing. And under the Washington law, these advisory neighborhood commissions, then they are actually elected, and their job is to call the attention of the various departments in the district, matters of concern in the neighborhoods. But when an advisory neighborhood commission makes a recommendation, it is not binding on whoever they're sending it to, but it is entitled to some weight, and it must be considered. And that's sort of a soft way of maybe amplifying one's voice a little bit, in that instead of just sending our select board about constitutionality to sending to the select board our views on the constitutionality of something being proposed, that if they have to at least consider it and make some sort of response to it before they throw it in the waste paper basket, that I think is perhaps a leg up, but it may be a step too far for Nantucket. I don't know. But my own feeling at this point, without more information about what this charter looks like and what other people think about our appropriate role, is that we should at least have an initial target of, maintaining what we have, number one, and number two, perhaps upgrading a little bit the that they don't just have to receive our advice, but they actually have to consider it, that sort of thing. And as I say, we've got some sort of precedent for it in another jurisdiction. But those are and I'll be happy to circulate to the entire group a very rough draft of what I'm talking about. So you can find it's always, put it on paper and it's easier to understand, perhaps.
Peter Kahn's hand is up.
Peter, yeah.
Well, you stole my thunder to a certain extent. I mean, I think it goes without saying that we need to have something in writing to, because obviously we all have the right to speak, even though we don't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
But we have to have something in writing to underscore, which will give us strength in and of that. And of course, if we could get them to force them to use some language of consideration, what have you, that will go a long way, because and they have to have some rationale. We can try to force them to at least express some rationale. Will be very, very helpful in the long haul. So I look forward to seeing the language.
Okay, you'll see it pretty quick. I'll try to get this out. I'll have to find it because I did it. I think a little bit over within the last year, and I think I've sent it to Donna in the past, and perhaps to Pam. But it's more of just a sort of a placeholder to be thinking about what the next steps are, because I think, having been involved in this group for a long time, I think it's a good group, and it has done things that are helpful to Nantucket that probably wouldn't have been done without our participation. And so I'm looking, to continue that in the future.
Peter, I had a question also, or a suggestion actually. So this is also for Donna. Is there any thoughts in this group that we should, if we submit some sort of language, that one thing that might be something we could ask for, certainly not get necessarily win on, but to continue the group that as we are as a committee in this new form of town government, but also have, and I think we've talked about this before, a non-voting member that's just on the council that basically is our chair or our vice chair that would be on this with these 9 people and just be our voice that's always there at the meetings. And instead of neighborhoods, I don't know that we represent neighborhoods as much as we represent non-voting taxpayers. So I think that having neighborhood input in there is a great idea also, because the neighborhoods are so very different. And if you think about some of the issues coming up in the short-term rental subcommittee, a lot of them are neighborhood-based issues that are a problem here, but not a problem somewhere else. So those are just my thoughts. And has that been shot down, or is that something that could be considered?
Are you, okay, Kathy, I think that's a very good idea, which you have just expressed. And so Peter, we are just starting the charter, so I will keep you informed as to where we are, but I do think it at some time, and I will discuss with you folks when, that we do submit something in writing, some language in writing as to our role and what we are requesting.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's timing is the big issue. We obviously we need to formulate what it is we think we want to do, but we don't want to, I mean, the main issue is getting a draft charter out there, not our particular part of that charter. But we don't want to be too early to have people pay attention to something that really, they're not thinking about yet. But we don't want to be too late, so the damn thing's set in stone and nobody wants to make any further changes to it.
Peter, I'm wondering, do you think it would be appropriate and to reach out to Joe and ask him? Or do you want to go through me and the committee? I'm not sure what the protocol is, if you could enlighten me.
Yeah, I think so here are my thoughts in general, and it's not going to be a terribly specific answer, but having been involved now in this STR thing, either directly or indirectly for what, 3 or 4 years, what I'm starting to learn, which you probably all knew before, is that we have a better voice for 2 reasons. Number one, I think we've been making reasoned arguments that are hard to just slough off. But leaving that aside, because I think the real reason is the long-term involvement of Peter and Bill and Kathy, sort of from her own organization and this organization. People get to know us, and after a while they get to trust people that they're talking to, and so it's this sort of hand-to-hand. I don't want to. It's not combat. It's more hand-holding and just being part of the community that is interested in a particular concept, rather than people constantly parachuting in from the outside. So, Don, I think the answer is, how do we, sort of socially, who is the person? We could call it lobbying or whatever you want to do, but who are the key person or persons in that group that need to be introduced to the idea, made comfortable with it, and then it, perhaps doesn't sound so strange.
It would be Joe.
Yeah.
He's very open to ideas, and yet he knows where we're heading. Probably more than what we see in committee time.
So maybe he should be one of our guest speakers, and we'll can sort of lay out what we'd like to hear. He's an important guy, and from whatever I've heard, he's a reasonable fellow, and
he is.
Maybe one of the things we ought to do is to invite him in. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea. So he becomes acquainted with who we are, what we do on a one-on-one.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Jen.
It's hard to get in. Joe's a very good friend of mine, and I had dinner with him two or three nights ago, and we talked about some of these things. Number one, he was very positively disposed to Donna. He said she's been really contributed a lot to the committee and really represented our position quite well. But
nice to hear.
He also, my sense was that he was all in favor of our committee somehow remaining part of this move towards a town council if it actually happens. The other thing is he sort of indicated that the committee is pretty well set on going towards the town council. There were 2 other forms of town government that they could have considered, and I guess they did early on. One was a representative town meeting, and the other was a city. Which is still another form, because in the city you elect the mayor, who's the town equivalent of the town manager, and the town council. The manager is appointed by the town council. But anyway, he indicated that at this point, the activities of the committee are moving towards all of these little aspects: how often we meet, how they divide up if they have 9 or 12 or whatever number of town councilors it is, how those get selected. I, in fact, suggested that it be done based on population. So if you have 10 and you have, just to use numbers, 10,000 voters in this in the town, that you try to create the precincts, let's call them, so that each precinct has approximately 1,000 or 10% of the population. That's kind of tricky, and you know, you'd always be accused of gerrymandering those sorts of things, but it gives the opportunity for certain groups. And I pointed out the Spanish-speaking folks would then potentially have a district in which they would be able to elect somebody, one of their people, as a counselor, which I think is a very positive thing. And Joe, in thinking about it, said it was interesting. He never likes to agree with me, so he avoided that. But anyway, I think if we have ideas that we want to put forth, now is probably the time to do it, rather than waiting until they've come, the committee, and Donna could comment, but my sense from Joe was they're now working the nuts and bolts of what this will look like, and we ought to see how we can put our ideas and our reason to exist, input it into that. The problem may be that if we are somehow a representative on the town council, that may be in violation of state laws, because we're not voters in Nantucket, and yet we're getting potentially a position in a committee that is chosen by the voters. So I don't know. That's something for the lawyers in the group to work out. But going back, I think this is the time to submit things. That's not what Joe said to me directly, but that's the sense I have.
Okay. That's very very valuable information, Gene. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can organize this by perhaps making a list of issues that we think would be helpful and giving them to Donna. And you know, it could conclude, I mean, part of it is this precinct issue, which I think, you know, handles Kathy's issue about neighborhoods, for example. You know, the way to get neighborhood representation is that you have precincts. The difficulty on Nantucket is you have all these neighborhoods that have actually no voters in them, or, you know, 4 voters in them, and all the rest of them are summer residents. And how do you, you know, you know, gerrymander is the wrong word, but how do you structure something that makes sense, given where the voting population actually is vis-a-vis the entire island?
But if you don't have precincts, however it's made up, then all of the councilors are at large, and they
Yes.
get voted by the entire community. I don't know that there's any other way other than either precinct or at large, or maybe some and some.
But it's obviously somebody needs to, presumably this is where the Collins Institute will come
Yes.
in and give some sage advice on this, you know, seemingly intractable problem. But it sounds like this is, you know, going. It sounds like the timeline is 1 to 2 years. The optimistic timeline is 1 to 2 years from today, and that's closer than we've been before. So I will circulate my thing to everybody and to Donna again. There's no pride and authorship in this thing. It's just an idea, and you know, maybe it'll be helpful, maybe it won't be helpful. So anything else on this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
one thought I had is that you know, this Collins Institute seems to be seems to have some expertise in this. Perhaps we could ask them what other communities have done about non-voting taxpayers. Now, I think the answer for most of Massachusetts is going to be nothing, because there aren't that many and they just don't, but on the Cape and the seashore, I think, and I don't know what Martha's Vineyard does. It might be interesting, and they would probably know pretty easily what arrangements have been made in those communities for non-voting taxpayers, and that could be useful precedent.
Yeah, it was I read something about Martha's Vineyard in the last couple of weeks, and it was my sense that their structure is totally different from Nantucket, that they have a lot of their communities are actually governments.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because that's another way of handling it, because that's a level of complexity that sort of moves in the wrong direction, I think.
If to Scott's point, I think is excellent. One of the reasons we chose the Collins Institute is because they have converted many of the Massachusetts governments to town councils. So we've been taking their guidance, so we'll continue. And that's another question to ask them.
So is that something that, meaning is, if it was how is it appropriate for you, Donna, to go to the Collins Institute? Do you go through Joe or go direct?
Joe does. No, we do not. Joe
Yeah.
goes through to the town council. And also, Libby is involved in this in a big way. So they are having their meetings as well.
Good. Well, that's where
Peter?
all the work gets done.
Peter?
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, why don't just to move it along a little bit, I'd suggest we schedule Joe for a session maybe in September, and then to tell him. I mean, I think Scott's idea is an excellent one, and as part of our discussion with him, make sure we ramp that up, and along with our other thoughts. And I think that, but just to go to them now before we talk to him, I think is a mistake. But I think we should get him on the calendar.
So you think-
Honestly, if I might, I don't know if we really I guess I'm not convinced we should reach out to the Collins Institute. I think it should go through Joe, period.
That's what I just said. That's what I said. I thought, yeah, that's what I just said.
I mean, it came up. And I think it would be better. Joe is the conduit. He is the person interfacing with Collins. I think Joe is the one who should be invited, as everyone is thinking, should be invited to at one of our meetings. And leave it at that. And then Joe can go to the Collins Institute.
Let me
Well, I
see.
agree. I think that's what I said. Yeah.
So that's procedurally how we do it. It sounds like it's through Joe.
Yes, it is. And Joe has made that very clear. So unfortunately, I don't think we should invite the Collins Institute. It's not under our purview.
No, we're not thinking of inviting.
said that.
The question is posing a question to them.
Through Joe.
And I think if one were to say, what is the issue that we are concerned about? The way it appears to me is that where you have, it's not a unique situation we're in. It happens all over the United States, but there's just not a lot of examples, I think. And it's the issue of resort communities where, a majority of the taxpayers, for want of a better word, are non-voters. And how does one fairly create a government that can reflect in some way the needs and aspirations of the part-time residents? Maybe you all would phrase it differently, but we're looking for a governmental structure where it's clear that there can be some organized participation by non-voters in that.
This sounds like 1776 here.
The
Anyway,
way it is.
I think let's get Joe on the calendar, and then that'll move it forward. I'd like to have spent some time talking about where the town council special committee is right now, after having gone through these supposed meetings to try to come up with a STR bill, a compromise bill, because you obviously, and I think Kathy, have attended more meetings than I have, but I must say, from what I heard, and I was not there for Thursday, but I am concerned about what I heard from people with regard to the sort of ultimatum at the end that Charity Benz put forward, and that I think could blow the whole thing up. And I think we need to make sure that we are ready for that, because I think everything that we've worked for could go down the drain if that.
Okay, well, let me suggest this, Peter. Let's tie a bow on this, and I think we're actually finished with the town council update.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yes, Gary.
And that is that we haven't, as a committee, talked about this until now, and I think defining what role the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers, whether there is still a need for a committee like ours, if in fact we can go to the legislature every time they meet and speak up. And so I'm not sure the entire voting community will think that now that we have the same access that they have, they don't have any greater access than we do to speak to the legislators on their once a month or twice a month meetings. The question is, if you folks, the advisory committee, say you represent the non-voting taxpayers, but any of the non-voting taxpayer can come to our meeting, they'll know what's on the agenda, and they can speak up to us. So why do you folks think that you can actually represent 40,000 people or 20,000 people when they don't even vote for you? You're selected by the town, so I don't think it's so clear that they're going to say, oh, of course you guys need to have a role. Years ago, the select board, the 5 people, said we have to make sure we understand what these folks are thinking. But if the situation changes where we have the same voice as all the other people, resident and non-resident taxpayers, it may not be so clear that they should think that we represent all the other 20 or 30,000 people. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just thinking some people may not feel that it's something that ought to be continued in the same mode. But we ought to talk about it a little more anyway.
So let's then, Donna, I see your hands up, but just before, I think this is something we're not going to finish the debate on today, but we now have 2 sides of this question that are up for consideration, and we do need to come to some in position as a group, and let's before we come to that position, which we're not going to come to today, consider what the alternatives are. Donna, you had something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say the fact that we were invited on this committee sends a signal. How far this goes, I don't know. But positively, I think when we're hopefully forming a new government, it's the time to have a special non-voting taxpayer commission. And finally, if somebody is coming to speak at a meeting every other week or something, that's great. That just reinforces who we are and what we do. I think it's supportive rather than, in that way. That's all. And we should invite Joe, and I think we'll have more information, and I think he will have a very good impression as to who we are, what we do, and support the fact that we should be involved in a new form of government should the voters agree to it.
Okay, let's talk about a date for Joe. Peter, you suggested September, is that right?
Yeah, because I thought our meetings were up. I thought we had people until then. I mean, I thought we had some.
We just have 2 people so far, Libby and the police chief.
Right. Well, what other open date? What other open date is there?
And then the I don't have the here they are. So I think the police chief is August 24th, I believe. I,
We
and
have the early August date open,
Okay. All right,
still.
All right,
so
so
August 3rd is the August date that's open.
August 3rd?
Yeah.
All right, but
Why don't we try August 3rd then?
Okay.
yeah, but I think
That's
it's
open.
important. I think it's important that we have a full discussion. I mean, it'd be helpful to have a full discussion where we have some sort of, not necessarily a vote, but a consensus before we meet with Joe, so it doesn't sound like we don't know what the hell we're talking about. So maybe, so we should leave some time at the next meeting, our next meeting, it seems to me, to discuss this further, because I have some thoughts with regard to what Gary said, but I'm going to hold those, and I think it's time. I think we spent enough time.
So July 13th will be Libby, and she usually takes what, about a half an hour?
Yeah. Any
And
questions?
I think July 13th is also our first meeting of the new fiscal year. And I think we are duty bound to, elect officers and do that. I would suggest we do that we hear from Libby first and let her do whatever we sort of hold our organizational thing, and then go on to this issue and whatever issues remain to be addressed at that meeting.
But Peter, that again, we never seem to have time at our meetings for after the first two subjects to get in anything else. And I think one of the things you wanted to talk about, perhaps today or perhaps after Libby, was what should we be doing other than responding to whatever crises arise. So,
yeah, no, we tried this last year, and we got a little bit into it because it's difficult to actually plan, isn't it? No, I agree with you that so July 13th, it's a lot to do. We're definitely not finished with this meeting, but we're trying to finish in the next 35 minutes. So let's see if we can get some of that, Steve, down, because I've heard from people of things that are very important to them, and I think we do need to address them. But we also need to talk about, I think we're not going to have an update on the advisory bike safety committee because Lynn is
here now. Well, she's
Peter, doesn't your screen show all of us with hands up and the people there?
Yeah, my screen is just showing a line. Let me see if I can get more.
Yeah, I think you ought to work on your screen because you never see when people have their hands up.
I have a small computer.
But press view and
press the gallery view up in the upper right hand.
Use the gallery view, then you'll see.
When I get gallery view, I get 6 people, and so now I have to drag it down, and now I'm getting more than 6. I don't know, but I'm getting 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people.
That's what there are.
You get 10. You get 10.
Okay. So I see it in.
That's all is on.
Yeah.
Lynn is here. She went to the trailer. I'm sorry I didn't reemphasize that we weren't going to be in the trailer. It was in the minutes from last week, but she missed the meeting, so she missed the discussion on that.
Yeah. It's
I'm here.
yeah.
She's here. Oh.
Lynn and I were at the trailer
Yeah, we had a
waiting
fun
to get in.
So bike safety, you're on, Lynn.
Yeah, there's nothing to report because their minutes are not uploaded and they're still just talking about how the program was being put into the public. And so you saw in the Inky this week that they have a notice. It was on the end of the first section that we're really excited to have the program start and the e-classifications for bikes. And then they put it on their website. And that's essentially what you're going to see, is just see how this gets monitored. They'll have a different sticker every year. So I did tell Kathy, I don't think there's a need to keep this on the agenda in the future because it's rolled out and until they come up with better enforcement ideas, there's not much to discuss. But there was something that came up yesterday that I did not have time to give you for the agenda, which was at the Nantucket Civic League today. They were talking about noise bylaws, and there was a debate someone from Brant Point did a lot of research and wanted a ban on construction in July and August for just the area by town, Sconset, and an area mid-island. And the Sconset Civic Board voted it down because they think you need a warrant that will actually pass, and banning construction is never going to pass. So they were discussing today having the hours be the same as they are for the TOH and the SOH island-wide from July 1st to Labor Day. So it'll be interesting to hear what all the civic leagues reported back on and what their feelings were. So we can keep that in the future on the agenda, since that's a big quality of life issue, and one of the points of the mission of town government is to make sure quality of life is adequate.
Good.
As long as it doesn't interfere with the real estate industry.
Exactly. Or STRs.
Let's talk about STRs. We only have a half hour left, Peter.
You know, by the way, if I may, yesterday, for example, I saw this, this humongous truck. I mean, this one I never big. We've got some big trucks on this island, but one that I never seen as large as this before, and it sort of caught my attention in the sense of saying, hey, you know, there are ways to scale. There are ways to scale some of this. This is a sort of a what do you call it? This was not a tractor or whatever. This is like a tractor trailer. Okay, so it's just a big tractor trailer. There are ways to scale some things back that would not necessarily, I think, affect the construction industry. And you know, I mean, that this is a long-term project, but so I do still think having a discussion with, maybe talking to a brick wall, but having a discussion with Toscano at some point may be at least worthwhile, at least to show that, hey, we're not bad people. You know, we just have, you know, to have try to have at least an intelligent discussion. Because it really is beginning to get, it is getting, you know, it's just exacerbating itself. Even though I am a total believer in not going, you know, the Don Quixote idea. We trying to stop the real estate development is crazy, but trying to tone it down a little bit here and there may be helpful. And that includes obviously the noise.
So Donna,
So the problem with,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the problem with the noise bylaw, it's about mechanical things, sanders, grinders, nail guns, trucks are not part of that. So that would be a big step to try and incorporate that as a separate subsection. They have a subsection on when you can fix your car, and that if you read through the bylaw, and it includes air conditioning. So you'll find the section they're concentrating on are points 4 and 5 if you go to the bylaw. So that can be for future.
Well, maybe it's more. Sorry, maybe it's more for to go back to the traffic planner, because I think that is something that might be within his realm as well.
Yes, so I agree. I think that's beyond the bylaw as stated, but better taken by the town. I know though there are some huge projects where I actually went to the end of Cannonberry Lane because they have an issue with drainage, and the conduits, the concrete tubing is about 12 feet high. I mean, I've never seen a construction project that big. And so sometimes you do need a truck to bring material like that. So I apologize, Donna, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Then that was important. Following Peter Collins' suggestion, I think it'd be a great idea to have, is it Carl? From Toscana or somebody, a representative, to understand, I mean, to face some of the public as to what's going on and how we're being affected noise-wise. I mean, part of my property is faces Prospect, and it's horrendous. These trucks, I agree with Peter, these trucks are huge. They're kind of getting scary. They're so big, they're too big for the roads, for one thing. Somebody has
That
to
brings
address
up a
it.
whole
Maybe
other
we could
point.
ask somebody to come and speak to us.
That brings up a whole other point. If you drive down Pleasant Street, say near Lyon or Jefferson, or if there are vehicles parked, which now there are these big trucks, construction trucks parked, it's no longer a two-way road. Because there's really not three separate lanes on Pleasant Street. And there may have to be some changes, in my opinion, some changes to the parking rules of the town so that doesn't become a bigger and bigger problem. I mean, it's just literally on Pleasant Street to get whichever way you're going, you got to wait for, you sort of take turns in getting through the parking, the one lane that exists after these big vehicles are parked. I don't know what the solution is, but the town somehow has to start dealing with that.
Okay, so I've got a whole bunch of hands up here. And in actuality, I think we've skipped over the STM thing right now, because I think we're into quality of life issues, which is next up. And let's see if we can, I think we finished with bike safety. And I think, thank you very much, Lynn. And so let's go to STM and get that finished, and then we'll finish up with the quality of life, which we are discussing sort of throughout this, keeps filtering back into it.
Peter, may I just say something real quick?
Yes.
Before, Jean, here's another thought. No trucks on certain streets.
I'm all for that. I mean, or make streets, if they have to be, change Pleasant Street to one way.
It's under study already. Gene, there's a possibility they were going to do it this summer, but they decided to wait till after the season, whether they should make Prospect Street a one way, or Pleasant Street one way. Anyway, we have to talk about short-term rentals.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these quality of life issues, there are already other people, banging their heads away at them and getting about as far as we have done in the past. And the question is, will become, what do we want to spend our time on? And perhaps we need to have people here volunteer to work with those people to get to a goal. But we'll go back to that in a second. So the short-term rental issue, I'll just start, and maybe Peter can help out, and Kathy can help out, and anybody else. So as you know, or as you may not know, there's going to be a special town meeting in the fall. There were 3 proposed warrants dealing with regulating short-term rentals. And the select board decided that it would form a small committee to see if this small committee could come up with a compromise proposal, taking into account the 3 proposals and seeing if the 3 proponents of those proposals could arrive at a compromise that would end up with there being, one article at the town meeting, which would then have a greater chance of passing. This will be a zoning change, and so it requires 2/3 of the voters to be approved. And with 3 articles up, any one of them getting 2/3 is quite difficult. And so there have been a series of meetings over the last month, I would say, that culminated on Friday. And to put it sort of simply, it appears that 2 of the 3 proponent groups have been seriously trying to achieve a compromise. And the 3rd proponent group, I'm sure, believes that it is seriously trying to achieve a compromise, so long as that compromise has the other 2 groups agreeing with their position, rather than them, moderating their position. And to make it pretty simple, the PNNF group whose main proponent is Charity Benz, has an article that in our view would discriminate against non-voting taxpayers because it require, in order for somebody to rent their property, short-term rent their property, to actually live in it for 32 consecutive days each year, or they wouldn't be able to rent their property. And then there would be some, pretty severe limitations on the number of times they could rent. And then there would be bonuses if you lived on the property more than 32 consecutive days a year. You could rent more days during the course of the year. And it's a fairly draconian proposition. The other two have various different attributes and drawbacks. Where we got to, I think, on Thursday night is that there is a fairly decent compromise proposal that the town council is working on final wordsmithing that solves our discrimination problem. We haven't read it yet, but would solve our discrimination problem. But at the end of the meeting on Thursday, Ms. Benz basically let it be known that after having extracted all the compromises she could extract from everybody else, that she was not willing to go along with their compromise article, and so she would be promoting her own article. There is a town council meeting, either an STR meeting or a town council meeting this coming week, to try to finalize the compromise, the so-called compromise proposal. And we don't know whether the select board, rather, not town council, whether the select board, how it will adjust it further, or whether it will eventually approve a compromise proposal. And so we're kind of where we started. It's not clear what's going to happen. There is a meeting that's going to go forward. If I were to predict today, if the compromise proposal that they've been working on were presented, I think it would have a chance of getting 2/3, but not a certainty. And the likely outcome of this meeting would be the same as the several town meetings before. No law that anybody can rely upon. But that's just a crystal ball.
But with respect to the proposal that came out, I just read what I read in the net, in the online thing. It sounded good to me.
Yeah, it's
not
great
good?
proposal.
No, the proposal, the proposal, which chair, because the proposal, because it was 2-1, so to speak, you had two groups voting, is fine, no question.
That to me is very important. If
well,
that's
yeah,
okay
and
with
I
us,
think no,
we ought to support it. Charity's not going to agree to anything. It's their road. Or
well, the irony,
that's it.
The irony here is that she actually had agreed. She had agreed to something, and then somebody pulled her chain back, which I think we know who that is. And she all of a sudden, the last second, she pulled back. But I just want to add here, I was at a function last evening and I had the opportunity to speak with Tucker Holland. Approached me, which was very, very nice. He loves our group, I guess, and he's got a new job also in housing, so we'll have to have him back at some point. But we were discussing this, and I expressed my concern that, God, we're going to go through this drill again, even because I do think the town council, I think the the select board will approve this compromise. I sense that they will approve the compromise. But the worry is that the residents, the voting residents, will, to get that 2/3, I think is going to be difficult. He was much more upbeat about it. He really thought that it could be done. So I think, just put in the back of I think we need to put in the back of our mind. I do think ultimately the fact that it will be found to be unconstitutional if they go forward, if they vote it down and require this the 30-day whatever residence requirement, needs to be that voice needs to be raised again before the September town meeting. And I think maybe people will realize that this is a wasted effort if they do that.
So on that point, I think all three proposals had potentially unconstitutional aspects to them. And
Originally.
we sent 2 letters to the group, to the select board group that was redrafting. I think the letters were well received, actually. And I know that one of the key proponents did a little bit of research on his own and found that a number of the things that he was proposing in terms of potentially unconstitutional provision, they were just totally impractical, and therefore he started pulling back, which helped sway a lot of people. I'm sorry, not being more specific on this, but so far we have been listened to, and it certainly was my objective as in public comment last week and otherwise, not to support the good things that they're trying to do and not to hammer on the unconstitutionality, because there's a group there that basically will, if you threaten them with anything, even something that actually is a clear and conspicuous threat, they're just going to go into their holes and put their hands up. So I agree with Peter that we probably need to do at least one more reaffirming constitutional letter for the select board to consider, because there is a tendency to try to solve their non-agreement problem by introducing unconstitutional elements, we've been sort of sliding back and forth the whole time on this, and I don't know how to control it other than to basically make it clear that if you do this and this, you're going to have a serious challenge.
But why don't we just say that we like the proposed compromise? We understand one group is not for it, but two-thirds of the groups are for it, and we support it. And it doesn't have any problem for us. Why don't we support that?
When is the
I actually did.
Peter, what is the when's the board meeting?
It's the 26th. It's next Wednesday, the select board meeting, and that's when they have to finalize the warrant for the whole summer. So that is it. Once whatever they decide on Wednesday is what's going to be in the warrant. And I'm guessing, so Charity will just keep her article in there as it is.
Right.
The other two probably will agree to say pull those articles out, take no action, I'm guessing. And then that's what it'll be. That'll be like the FinCom recommendation or the planning board recommendation. Right. So they will still go through that whole process this summer to get, the warrant will say that FinCom has this opinion and the planning board has this opinion, and that'll still happen. But what's actually in the warrant will be finalized on the 26th. So I agree, we should send something to support it and why we don't support.
It's because it doesn't discriminate. Right. We should treat everyone, all taxpayers are treated fairly, and we therefore support this compromise proposal.
So I did orally say, without saying it doesn't discriminate, I did say that the compromise proposal as currently drafted, still being drafted, was something that the non-voting taxpayers could support. And we thought it was a good solution.
Yeah, I think we should put something in writing though, so it's in the record.
Fine.
So we could drop something in Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesdays too.
This public comment session they set out 2 hours for public comments, and nobody would comment. So finally, I broke the ice and just basically said, "This is a good thing," it was not like that opened the floodgates, but.
My only concern on the current proposal is that there are several hundred locals, that means voters, that have more than one property, and telling them they have to sell or do whatever and get rid of them in 8 years. they're not going to vote for it. So they've lost those votes. So that's somewhat of a concern there. But that's what the compromise was.
Yeah. And let me be clear. This is not a perfect compromise. It's perfect as far as our issue goes, but there are a lot of, scratch your head problems that is still a concern that I have, and I think, Kathy, you probably agree with it, that even if passed, that this is going to be not good for the economy of Nantucket. But that's kind of where we are right now.
Right, as the SS short-term rentals are sold, and even if the new person starts one, they can only do 3 rentals in the summer. And so there's just, and that's just a slow attrition, which will go on forever, to the point where there won't be anybody who can rent more than 3 times in the summer. So that'll affect the economy. It'll have to adjust over time, or they'll have to undo it, which will be a 2/3 vote, and that's really hard to get.
But, it was interesting. I thought somebody made, in the public comment, somebody made a good point. There were not many good points, but one, which is that the business community on Nantucket has not really put itself out there on this issue. I mean, and it's surprisingly so. I would have thought, and I think they could still be effective if they would, but the chamber, they are not taking the bait here. They're just sitting, letting this go by. I mean, clearly, I understand why the real estate community is sort of laying low, because they're the sort of the boogeyman. But the small shop owners, who are the ones who are going to be affected heavily by this.
It's summertime. They're flat out. They can't pay. No one's going to pay attention to this.
Yeah, but they could get the chamber. The chamber could do. I mean, that's what they got a representative group for. They could be doing something if they really got organized.
Yeah, I think the people who are going to be hurt most directly, in addition to restaurants, maybe the airport eventually, you name them. But there's this cadre of what I'll call the service industry.
Oh, yeah,
basically does all the
grass cutters, the maids, the whatever. Yeah,
there are all these folks that are their main source of income is start to dry up, and it's a we're between a rock and a hard place.
Well, the irony, and just one last point. I mean, there's all this talk about how we need low and moderate income housing to support the service industry. Well, it's that very service industry that's going to get hurt by this, and so they
won't be able to afford the housing.
Exactly.
So I think we'll figure out something else to write, short and sweet, making clear the support, and bring up the good aspects of this, and we'll send that in, and then we'll go to our aspirational stuff. Now we've got at least 10 minutes to go, and let me just start by saying I know noise is probably the biggest issue that recurs from anybody. Had a beautiful message from Gene earlier this week about, or last week, about noise issues. And it's just been a stumbling block for us because of, I guess, the same reason that Sconset voted against, curtailing construction during a period of time of the year. My experience has been the voters are not very, they want peace and quiet too, but they don't want peace and quiet if somebody's going to tell them to be quiet. And it's just been a terrible problem. And so I think there needs to be a bunch of sort of incremental, modest improvements in the noise regulation. And then you've got the problem on the island of enforcement. Nobody wants to enforce these regulations. The police department clearly wants no part of it. I don't have a solution for it. And my concern is that other than giving generalized support to peace and quiet, that we could, we have limited resources, and this may not be the best use of our resources.
Yeah, but I think traffic is, I would say traffic is right up there with noise, if not more so right now. And I must say this summer, for me anyway, is an eye opener. Normally June, I have not seen this much traffic in June backed up at the usual places. I mean, June is already July and August now. If you go to the high school or to the Rotary or wherever. I mean, it's so that I mean I think that should be a focus that something that we arguably could do, and I do think the locals are just as concerned about traffic as we are. But the answers may not be so readily available, and that's
But so what are as I understand the traffic situation, the streets are too narrow, there are not enough of them, and there are too many cars on it. So how do you solve the traffic problem?
Right, but you could make some. But the Rotary, for example,
I mean, we supported what several years
I mean,
ago.
we could. I mean, for example, the idea of putting the Rotary in on the 7 mile milestone at Nobadir is being talked about, and we should certainly throw our weight in there and say, hey, that's something we think ought to be done. I think also
they're working on it, right?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's been
Didn't
approved.
Mike say that?
Has it been approved?
Mike said they're working on it.
It's been
Yes,
approved.
it is under analysis, so you should expect that.
Yeah,
It's a
okay. If it's
state-
under that's my point. If it's under analysis, we ought to weigh in on it. And
It's a state road, so we couldn't do, it's a state
Well,
road
So
milestone.
what? So what? There's no reason why we can't be heard by the state authority that's making the
Yep.
decision.
Yeah, but I thought that we're gonna do it because it was a state road.
Great. I mean, I also think though, that, I mean, again, little bits. I mean, this whole having just focusing on the size of some of this equipment is beyond the size of the roads now. I mean, it really is getting to that point where, and there needs to be at least begin to have some discussion. Also, I think sitting with having more input, spending more time with the traffic guy, whatever his name is again, I forgot, on these one-ways. Yeah, right, on these streets. I mean, I must say, I thought, Gary, rather, I think what has been approved or what's under discussion is one way for Pleasant, only from Stop and Shop down to Five Corners. What Gene was talking about is beyond that.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, and the area that's really a problem is more towards Main Street on Pleasant, where where that big house is, with big walls. I mean, you can't get through there without as Gene says, stopping and starting and whatever. But the point, I mean, that's just two examples. I think there is something here that I don't think we're necessarily tilting at windmills on some of this stuff.
But I think when you talk about the size of the vehicles, you're running into state law. So long as the vehicle size is okay under state law, what can you do about it? It's like the speed limit in Wisconsin. The state law limits what local law can do to deal with these problems.
But couldn't we?
Well, again, I mean, maybe you're right.
Also,
I'm not so sure that all on state roads. On state roads, I agree with you. Obviously, there's, but not all. Nantucket, there are many roads that are not state roads, and I don't see why Nantucket cannot enforce that on their roads, which would effectively.
What about truck routes?
Some of these trucks can't operate, obviously, if they can only stay on state roads.
What about truck routes? In addition to more one-way streets, if we had truck routes, that way we don't go up against Toscana and other people, but they have to observe certain roads that they can use and certain ones they can't use. Isn't that a way around the problem with large vehicles? Because the folks who have the large vehicles are saying, well, this is an economical way of delivering X number of tons of stuff for the next, $50 million mansion.
My guess is that that's effectively in place now that there are certain roads.
Oh, sorry. Using that Pleasant Street as an example, and I'm sure there are other streets just like it, the town could eliminate parking on Pleasant Street. So then you'd have the ability to go, back and forth, to have two-way, or it can make it a one-way street. And those, I would think, are within the purview of the town, regardless of what. I don't think there are state laws that prevent towns from making those considerations. And part of the big problem on Pleasant Street, as I said before, is that once you have a parking, you don't really have 3 full lanes. And so if there's 1 lane for parking, you have like a lane and a quarter left for the 2 ways. And, you know, that exists, that may exist elsewhere. So I'm not worried about the town, but I just want to go back to the quiet issue. We represent non-voting taxpayers, the majority of whom spend whatever time they spend on Nantucket is probably spent in the summer. And if somebody, whether they're like us here for 6 months, or some people who are non-voting taxpayers are here for 2 weeks, when they're in their house or out in their yard, it would be nice if it were quiet. And so I think as representatives of that constituency, we should be at least putting out our beliefs in certain issues, like a quiet summer. There's nothing wrong. We may never get it done, Peter. You're absolutely right. You're running against the construction trades. You're running against real estate trade. It may be impossible to do, but at least we ought to get up there and try to do the best we can, and let it be known that those are the kinds of things that would be helpful to our community, our constituency.
So
I agree with,
I would add that if the Civic League has had this discussion and they have enough support across the island, this is what Libby Gibson asked them to look at. She's looking to see that support so the town and the select board would also support it. So from our point of view, the only thing we have to do is say we're totally for restricting the hours in a certain time period at the height of the summer. So it's not a heavy lift to have our group be one of the key supporters that talks to the town and our role as the advisor to the select board. So I don't see this as a huge issue. It has to be a warrant article that comes from a resident, which would make it stronger than having non-residents hire an attorney to represent them, which is possible as well. So I think you should just consider watching this issue because it is moving forward, just not in a circle that you've expected in the past. And they're using the SOH and TOH as an example of, we've had this for 3 years. We've seen no pushback. It hasn't changed the economy in a negative way. So that is what FinCom was looking for when they cut back your proposal to just SOH and TOH. They wanted to see this as a test. And I think we've passed that test. So let's look for a collaboration. You don't have to be the leader, but you certainly, I've expressed to Sconset that our board, our committee would be very interested in helping or following or supporting as they develop a more fine-tuned proposal.
Is there like a 1 paragraph or 1 page description of this solution that is being considered that we
But
might?
Yeah, so they took the noise bylaw
Mhm.
and they rewrote it to take out the exception and just made it, this is the way it is for everyone. Sconset didn't want to sign on to the other article because it makes us look like prima donnas.
Yeah.
And we think it's not just our issue, it's Maddocket's issue, it's Quidnet's issue, it's all over the place. So they didn't say no because they think it's a bad idea. They just think it should be a universal idea, which makes it much more, gives it much more weight to the select board and to Libby.
Can you circulate whatever that is?
Yeah, I want to see what they have as, if they modified it after today's meeting, then yes, I would certainly send that to you as well.
Because that would give us something we could, comment on or just support. And
Right.
as you say, it's not a heavy lift. There's so many people lifting that we can just add whatever strength we have to the lifting.
Right. Right.
Lynn, what's TOH and SOH? Pardon my,
Town Old Historic and SOH is Sconset Old Historic.
Right.
So when you go on a GIS map through the town, you'll see that symbol all the time, and you'll see it in HDC meetings too. So it another acronym for you not to remember, because it's just a small
I
area.
think, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think maybe we've accomplished, or really we're heading toward an accomplishment in this area. Hard to say, but I think are there any other issues, there's quality of life issues that people want to discuss today? I realize we're sort of running out of time for a number of people who need to leave.
No, other than I would just like to say how important this issue is for our constituents, noise and large trucks.
I would just add that we can use letters to the editor or talking points to all of the 3 publications, which many of the non-voting taxpayers read, and to get more support for our position.
Okay, well, let's see if we can crisp up our position, which sounds like there's a
I'm
good
sorry,
chance of doing that.
Steve, could you repeat that? You broke up.
I'm just saying, if we have a short position, a 2-paragraph position, we can, and sort of this is the issue of communications and visibility and awareness about us, we could put that in the Inky or the Current or Daybreak. And my experience has been they almost all the time run what we send them.
And maybe it would ask them to respond or spark, an interest in what's going on that way. Because it's true, I agree with Jean. Most of our non-voting taxpayers just come in the summer. And that's where all the noise and trucks.
Well, ultimately, the noise and the traffic and the trucks will make it less desirable for people to want to rent. So the short-term rental thing coincides with this.
I think we have to realize Nantucket is so special to all of us, but it's not the only place on earth. And if it gets too noisy and too crowded, people will go.
Well, yeah, I heard from a friend who's.
Peter, you broke up.
Peter, yeah,
You froze.
you froze, Peter.
Okay.
Oh, I just said that I have. Can you hear me? I just said that I have a friend here who just told me that he has bought land very inexpensively on Prince Edward Island, and I thought that was a pretty good idea.
How do you get there?
Yeah, the pain.
That's
There's
a
also
little bit of a problem through Toronto or Montreal.
there's also a way for us to share concerns about the trucks and the parking on Pleasant. You don't forget you have the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, which Mike Burns also sits on as the traffic planner, that you can either address this generally or have a specific recommendation. And usually it comes from either a homeowner or a civic association, but there is no reason why anyone from this committee could not share that in their role on the committee.
Yeah. So do we need a little subcommittee of our committee to address these issues in some organized way? Is that would be, if somebody would be interested in sort of putting something together and sort of being the major domo for this, that would be wonderful.
To that point, Lynn, what do you think, since you've been involved in this? Let's do Peter's suggestion.
I'm happy to follow with the noise issue with the Nantucket Civic League, because I know all of them, and to report back, but I've also worked with the traffic safety committee. So if someone wants to monitor that with me, or if you want to present your idea there, I think that would be a great idea too. So I'm happy to be on both committees, and I'm happy to have people join me.
So would somebody like to join Lynn, especially in this traffic safety area, so that she's not bearing the full load of this?
Okay,
You break it
I
up.
would like to help out Lynn somehow.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll help out on the quiet part of the,
Let's have a
Okay.
quiet Nantucket again. It used to be very quiet. Not anymore.
yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks. So do we have a motion to adjourn perhaps? I think we've kind of,
Wait a minute, just one more thing before we do that, if we could. The next meeting that's scheduled for the 13th, Peter, with Libby.
Libby.
Yes, I won't be on island. If you want to run the meeting out of the trailer, you'll need to do it, and you'll need to get your training updated on how to do it from
Yep.
there. So I just wanted you to, I want to make sure that everybody knows where it's going to be, and who's going to host it next
if I'm
month.
capable, I will do it.
Okay, so you can, I think you can contact Erica, and she can arrange to have somebody from
Eric
IT
has been very helpful.
go practice. Okay, great. And then the other thing is, on the agenda for next time, do we need to, can you convene the meeting and start the recording and everything if technically we haven't elected our new people yet? I mean, I know you want to flip that, and I want to make sure, approving the agenda and the minutes, I'm not sure, I don't want to violate any rules or not, or anything to put it in the wrong order.
Well, then what we might be able to do is just entertain, we'll figure out if we have a quorum, and then entertain Libby, and then do our organizational stuff, including approving the rest of the agenda and the minutes. I just don't know the answer to that. But it's obvious that, I don't think we can do this before the meeting, reconstitute ourselves. And so it's just a matter of, it's a temporal issue.
Right, okay, so I'll just put that, I'll put the agenda in that order, that's all.
Yeah.
That's my question, thank
So
you.
this meeting the next meeting is going to be in person in the trailer?
It'll be hybrid. And those who want to come to the trailer, be fine. Otherwise, you can, tune in as you've tuned in today.
What about for the rest of the summer?
I would go meeting by meeting, figure that, but I think the idea is to
Hybrid.
have the hybrid meeting for the rest of the summer.
I'll be there for the rest of the summer, so they'll have two of us that can.
Yeah, I think I'll be around all summer long, except for the, where is it, the September meeting. I may not.
I'll be here for that one.
Good.
Okay, thanks. Oh, that was my only question. Thank you.
We'll have
Sorry.
two sets of thumbs then.
All right.
Can we motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, and motion adjourned. Any second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you all very much for your attention, and I've enjoyed seeing you all.
Bye, everybody. Stay cool.
Bye-bye. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.